On January 17, 2024, Kensington Palace put out a short statement. The Princess of Wales had undergone planned abdominal surgery, it said, and she would be recovering out of public view until after Easter. That's it, a simple, reasonable, unremarkable message. And before I say another word, I want to be completely clear about something, because it matters more than anything else in this video. What Kate was actually going through was serious, it was real, and it deserves nothing but compassion. This story is not about her body, or her illness, or her recovery. She did nothing wrong. Keep that in your mind the whole way through. Because here's what happened next. Nothing. Silence. For weeks, the most photographed woman on the entire planet, a person the world normally sees dozens of times a month, at engagements, at school runs, on balconies, in car windows, simply wasn't seen. No appearances, no verified new photos, nothing. And into that empty space, the internet poured everything it had: theories, rumors, jokes, genuine cruelty, a global guessing game that trended for weeks across every platform on Earth. Think about the irony of that for a second. The palace went quiet for one reason: to protect her privacy and to calm the speculation down. And instead, the quiet became the story. The harder they said nothing, the louder the world screamed. An institution reached for silence, its oldest, most trusted tool, and detonated the single biggest royal frenzy of the social media age. And the one event that turned all of this from a simmer into a worldwide explosion, it wasn't a rumor at all. It was something the palace itself released, and then had to watch the world's own news agencies tear apart, in public, in real time. We'll get to it. Stay with me, because that moment is the whole story. Let's start with the trap the institution walked straight into. The palace has a theory of communication, and it's more than 100 years old. The theory is simple: say as little as possible, and speculation will starve. Give the rumor no oxygen, and it burns out on its own. For a century, in a world where the palace controlled what the public got to see, that worked beautifully. But here's the problem. In a social media age, a vacuum isn't calm. A vacuum is an invitation, and the internet always accepts the invitation. 10 years ago, a quiet recovery would have stayed quiet. A few tabloid guesses, a slow news cycle, and it fades. But the ground had shifted underneath the palace without anyone in that building fully registering it. The tools that let a rumor reach 100 million people in an afternoon didn't exist when this say-nothing doctrine was written. The doctrine never got updated. The world did. So every single day the palace stayed silent to reduce the speculation grew instead. Because in 2024, an absence of information is information. Silence doesn't read as dignity anymore. It reads as concealment. It reads as, they're hiding something. And the institution just kept doing more of it. More silence, applied to a problem that silence was actively feeding. It was like pouring water on a grease fire and being surprised when the flames climbed higher. The tool ran exactly backwards, and nobody in that building seemed to notice in time. Now here's where it gets genuinely uncomfortable. And I want you to actually think about this one, because there's a real person's health sitting quietly in the background of it. There are two ways to read what the palace did. Two doors. And I want you to pick one in your head. Door number one. The palace was simply admirably protecting a sick woman's privacy. She was recovering. She was entitled to peace. And the frenzy? That was the public's fault. The internet's fault. The tabloids' fault. Not the institution's. That's the generous door. But walk through it, and here's what it cost them. Because even if that's completely true, the palace still failed at its actual job. Its job isn't just to keep secrets. Its job is to manage the relationship between the royal family and the public. And a century of communications expertise proved utterly useless the exact moment it was needed most. Door number two. The palace mishandled the whole thing. The statement was too vague. The timeline was too long. And then, as we'll see, came a photo that made everything worse. If you walk through this door, then the institution's own clumsiness directly caused avoidable cruelty aimed at a woman who was recovering from surgery. So which is it? Blameless but failed, or careless and harmful? And notice what I'm asking, because this matters. I'm not asking you to judge Kate. There's nothing to judge. I'm asking about the institution. Whose actual job was it to shield her from that frenzy? And who had the power to end the entire thing with a single honest sentence, and didn't? Tell me down in the comments, door 1 or door 2? I read them, and I think the split on this one says a lot about how people see the whole machine. Now let's talk about how high the stakes climbed, because this didn't stay a British story for long. It went planetary. The speculation got so intense it dominated global news for weeks. Foreign news outlets ran with it. Late-night hosts made segments out of it. It became one of the most searched topics in the world. This was no longer a royal watcher niche. This was the #1 guessing game on the internet. And I want you to sit with where that pressure eventually led, because it's genuinely stunning. The communications failure became so total, so complete, that the only thing anyone could think of to end it was for the Princess of Wales herself to personally record a video message and disclose a cancer diagnosis to the entire world. Let that sink in. The remedy for the palace's failure was the patient surrendering her own medical privacy, on camera, to billions of strangers. The one thing the silence was supposedly protecting, her privacy, she had to give away herself, in the end, just to make the noise stop. And it kept escalating in ways nobody could have scripted. Sightings became a global sport. A grainy video of Kate at a farm shop was dissected frame by strangers who'd never met her, arguing about whether it was even really her. Conspiracy theories that would have been laughed out of any newsroom a decade ago were now trending above actual wars. And every one of those theories fed on the same fuel. The palace wasn't saying anything, so people filled the gap with the wildest thing they could imagine. The less the institution said, the more elaborate the fantasies became. That's the mechanism. That's what a vacuum does. That is the professional cost, right there. The palace has exactly one core competence, one job it's supposed to be the best in the world at, managing the royal image. And it lost control of the single biggest royal story of the year so badly that the sick principal, the person it was meant to be protecting, had to walk out and clean up the mess personally. That's not a communications operation, that's a communications collapse. Okay, this is the moment I promised you at the very beginning. This is the thing the palace did that turned a national story into a planetary one overnight. Let's open it. In the middle of the silence, with the whole world asking, "Where is she? Why haven't we seen her?" the palace decided to finally do something proactive. On Mother's Day in the UK, they released a warm family photo. Kate, smiling, surrounded by her 3 children. The message was obvious. See, she's fine, she's home, everything's okay. It was meant to reassure me. It was meant to calm the storm. And within hours, it did the opposite. Because the world's major news agencies, the big global wire services, the ones that supply photos to newspapers everywhere, looked at that image closely, spotted signs of digital manipulation, and did something almost unheard of. They issued what's called a kill notice, a formal instruction to every client newsroom. Retract this photo, pull it, do not use it. It had been altered. Now think about the timing of that. Think about what it did. In the middle of a "where is she" panic, a doctored photo doesn't read as reassurance. It reads as proof. Proof that something is being hidden. Proof that the reassurance itself can't be trusted. The single proactive thing the palace did to fill the vacuum became the accelerant that blew it wide open. Overnight, the story went from national to global, from a simmer to a wildfire. The one attempt to fill the silence with something detonated in their hands. And the agency retractions aren't a theory or a rumor, they're documented facts. The wire services said on the record, in public, "We're pulling this image." That happened. That's the knockout blow of this whole story. And by the way, that photo is a story all on its own, one I'll point you to at the end. And stop and appreciate the scale of your own goal here. The agencies I'm talking about are the most cautious, most careful photo desks in the world. Their entire business is trust. They don't retract lightly, and they don't retract royal photos ever, really, until this one. For them to look at an official image from Kensington Palace and collectively say, "We can't stand behind this," was itself a historic moment. It had essentially never happened before. The palace didn't just release a flawed photo, it handed the world's most trusted institutions a reason to publicly distrust it, at the exact moment it most needed to be believed. Quick thing, and then straight back to it. If you're finding this useful, if you want the royal stories told this way, straight, with the receipts, and with a bit of fairness where fairness is due, do me a favor and subscribe. It genuinely helps the channel more than you'd think. That's the only time I'll ask. Okay, back to it, because the photo is only half the picture. The other half is why the palace kept doing this to itself. Because here's the thing you have to understand. This wasn't a one-off blunder. This was a reflex. It's the exact same reflex you see running through every single royal story I've ever covered on this channel. Silence as the answer to everything. Recollections may vary. The sealed report nobody's allowed to read. They will be locked away for 90 years. The unnamed concerns that were never explained. Over and over and over, the same instinct. Say nothing. Wait it out. Let the storm pass. And here's what makes it a genuine character flaw rather than just bad luck. They had the counterexample sitting right in front of them. Other members of the family, other institutions, other public figures have learned that in this era, you get ahead of the story or the story gets ahead of you. A single warm, human, timely update, a photo taken in front of witnesses, a short, honest note, anything real, would have drained the whole thing of its power in a day. The palace had that option available every morning for weeks, and every morning it chose the same thing. Wait, hold, say nothing, trust the silence. It's not that they didn't know how to communicate, it's that their deepest instinct actively told them not to. And confronted with a brand new kind of crisis, a modern, real-time information crisis, the palace reached for the same tool it always reaches for. Say nothing. Because for 100 years, saying nothing worked. But that reflex was forged in an era when the palace controlled the flow of information completely, when they decided what the public saw and when. And that era is over. It's gone. Today, silence isn't a shield. Silence is just an empty stage, and the internet will always, always walk onto an empty stage and write its own script. They keep bringing a pre-internet weapon to a post-internet war, and they keep losing. Now, I want to be really careful and really fair here, because this next part matters enormously. When Kate did finally speak, that video announcement, it was genuinely moving. It was dignified. It was brave. And the public's compassion for her was real, and it was immediate, and it was universal. That appeal did not fail. She did not fail. Let me say that as plainly as I can. Kate earned every ounce of the compassion she received, and more. What failed was something else entirely. What failed was the palace's earlier, quieter appeal, the one that basically said, "Trust our vague statement, respect the privacy, and please stop asking." And that appeal rang hollow. Not because privacy doesn't matter, it does, but because they asked the public to be patient while giving them absolutely nothing to be patient with. And then, into that patience, they handed the world a manipulated photograph. You cannot ask people to trust you while doing the precise things that destroy trust. The institution asked for faith and then spent that faith recklessly. Kate had to buy it back, with her own privacy. She paid the bill for a mistake that wasn't hers. And that is the hypocrisy at the heart of this whole thing. And it isn't Kate's hypocrisy. She has none in this story. It's the institutions. The palace's most cherished principle, the thing it repeats endlessly, is that the royal family is owed privacy, owed restraint, owed the benefit of the doubt. And yet its own mishandling of Kate's recovery produced the single greatest invasion of a royal's medical privacy in the entire social media age. The self-appointed guardians of royal privacy ran the exact operation that stripped it bare, and then let the patient herself pay to put it back together. "Here's the moral," said Flat and Plain. "An institution that treats silence as respect, in an age that treats silence as concealment, will keep sacrificing the very people it believes it's protecting, every single time." And I want to slow down for the human reality underneath all of it, because it's easy to get lost in the machinery and forget. Picture it honestly: a woman recovering from serious surgery, facing, we would later learn, a cancer diagnosis. And while she's going through the most frightening, most private ordeal a person can face, the entire planet is out there, publicly, loudly, debating where she is and what's really going on. That is an isolation no human being should ever have to endure. And I'm not going to dress that up or make a spectacle of it. It's just true, and it's awful, and she deserved so much better than that. For the institution, the isolation was of a completely different kind. It was reputational, a communications operation that stood almost entirely alone in its failure, defended by hardly anyone, criticized, and this is the telling part, even by loyal, sympathetic royal correspondents. People who normally give the palace every benefit of the doubt were openly saying the palace had lost control. That's how bad it got. When your own friendliest observers are shaking their heads, you failed at the one thing you're supposed to be good at. And that contrast is the whole moral center of this story. On one side, Kate's grace under an unbearable worldwide spotlight. On the other, the machine that aimed that spotlight at her and then couldn't figure out how to switch it off. She was left alone in the glare, and the machine is what put her there. So where does that leave us? The frenzy happened. It can't be unhappened. It stands now as the defining case study of how the palace's oldest instinct, reach for silence, fails completely in the modern world. And Kate is recovering, and this channel wishes her nothing but the very best. Full stop. No caveats, no but, just that. Here's the part I keep coming back to, and it's aimed squarely at the institution, not at the person. Kate did nothing wrong. I'll say it one more time because it's the truest thing in this whole video. Her courage was the one thing in this entire story that was above criticism. But the palace had the power, at any single moment across those long weeks, to calm the world with a little honesty. And instead it chose silence. And then it chose a doctored photo. And it kept choosing, right up until a recovering woman had to end the whole thing herself. So here's my question for you, and I genuinely want your answer below, but keep it kind, because a real person is at the center of this. When silence is the very thing hurting the people you're supposed to protect, why does this institution reach for it every single time? Why is the lesson never learned? Tell me what you think. And if you want to see the other half of this story, the photo itself, the one the world's news agencies killed, and the strange, revealing story of how it was made and why it fooled no one, that breakdown is waiting for you right here. Because the silence detonated the frenzy, but the photo? The photo is where it all exploded. I'll see you in it.